Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Shanty Show, the show about shanties. I'm Stefan.
Richard.
I'm James.
I'm Tim.
And today on the show, we have Coda. And James, you've been wanting to have these guys on the show for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this episode. I'm a huge fan of Coda. They're a really excellent 7-piece vocal harmony group based in Westport, County Mayo, Ireland, up Mayo. And I first heard them in 2016 at a festival in Inishbofin, Ireland. And following that, I was going out to Ireland a few times a year with Inish Free Tours, which is run by Mr. Paddy Downs, with the incomparable Brendan Stonywall, with being the tour guide alongside David Francie. So really wonderful experiences. And one of the great spots we got to check out was Westport. And we'd invariably end up at Matt Malloy's pub, which is where I met Declan Askin. And yeah, here we are. I'm really excited to have them on today.
And they've got a couple albums out, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the episode. We'll link it up in the show notes, and it's a great mix of Scots Gaelic, some original songs, and of course, sea shanties. It's a great conversation. Hope you enjoy it.
Don't mind the rain on a rolling sea. Yes, weary nights never will be seen. On the hardest time that sailors take is to watch the sun as it dies away. Here's one more day on the grave of life. Never find a ship that sails the sea. It's still a prison for the likes of me. But give me wings and over stuff. I'll fly afar to the girl I love. Here's one more day on the grave of life. Oh Lord, his dreams were growing. I've held my hands on that wooden wheel, and with all my heart I turn her around and tell the boys that we're homeward bound. Here's one more day on the grave of life. I'll pass the time like some machine until the waters turn to green, and I'll dance on down that walk ashore and sail the grave from the line no more, and sail the grave from the line no more.
Well, we're very excited this week to be welcoming Coda all the way from Mayo and Malaga. So welcome, fellas. Thank you for joining us.
How you doing?
Very well, very well.
Amazing.
So is how did Coda come together, and sort of what place does nautical music and the shanties occupy within the broader kind of range of what you guys do?
So Coda came together, lads. I guess it's I don't know, 10 or 11 years ago, maybe. Anyway, we all know each other because we live in the same area in and around Westport. We've been singing in a choir together, kind of classical choral stuff, and we got together just with the idea of just singing. Would we sing a few songs? There were actually 8 of us originally, and then it came down to 7, and we just started meeting up in each other's houses. We'd bring a song to the table. We'd have a go at it, print out the words, have a go, sing it over a few times. We'd do it for a few weeks, and if it started to kind of sound good, we'd stick with it, or if it started to suit us, we'd stick with it. And if it didn't, it'd just get binned, and we'd move on. And we just had great fun doing it, I suppose, because there's a freedom of making up our own harmonies. A lot of it was a cappella at the start. Of course, we have 4 musicians or 5 musicians in the group. So then we started introducing instruments and stuff like that. It just kind of took off from there.
Ben, I was curious, when you guys are coming up with your own arrangements, are you guys just doing it kind of by ear, or are you notating it down as well?
Yeah. So well, what may happen sometimes is that, we'd be singing something. So say I'm singing melody. Some of the other guys then are singing harmonies, and then we kind of think, well, maybe we're missing something there. So one of the guys might be playing the chords on the guitar and say, right, okay, so it's a certain chord, and we're missing maybe one note out of that chord. So, could you try an E, or could you try an F there, or whatever, But most of the time it's just we sing the songs, and we just sing whatever harmonies feels right. And it usually works most of the time, but say just the odd time, maybe somebody sit at the guitar or the piano and just work out an extra note or two here and there, But
How do you feel about kind of walking that line between just kind of finding whatever spot you can, really let her ring, and then also kind of staying true to the tradition? How does what you're doing kind of tie back to the tradition of the music in terms of where you're from?
In terms of the sound you're talking about, it depends on the shanty. I mean, some shanties you can automatically hear that a big sound works well in them, and other ones it doesn't. So, for example, like if we sang Randy Dandy, we would split up. We wouldn't all sing it together. So we might have 2 people singing or 3 people singing, and then we'd all come in. So in those places where it needs to sound, edgy or more raucous, we would reduce the number of singers, and then when you're only singing with one other person, you can be more and if you're in with 7 people, so it depends on the song, really. That's how it would work, really.
Yeah, and you need to understand where the song is coming from as well, that these were working songs, a lot of them, and the guys were actually pulling ropes and and lifting anchors and doing all sorts of work on the boats, and how they would have sung them then, they're not going to sing it like they were on a concert stage, they're going to sing it as if they, these were, tunes that helped them get rid of the monotony of their work on the sea or whatever,
We were doing the same. That's why we started singing, to get rid of the monotony of this normal life. You know what I mean? We just let's just sit and sing and drink and.
Yeah.
Is that how the shanties came into it? Because I know Tim and I both grew up doing just social singing, right? You're at a party, it's probably multi-generational, you're a few beers in and somebody starts up a song in the kitchen. And shanties were just great because they're simple, good, frequent choruses.
Well, that's it. They're lovely songs to sing, and a lot of them are very simple and others aren't. But I mean, it's a great place to start. And they're men songs. Do you know what I mean? They're for men. So it ticks every box, and they revolve around drinking. And so I can't think of a better place to start, really.
Because of the way we kind of work, as in, so when we're starting singing, or we bring a new shanty or any new song, actually. So the harmonies are different every night, because it takes us a long time to kind of settle into what our lines eventually end up being. And for the first few months, we can often be singing something completely different every time we sing it, you know. And I suppose that's kind of good and bad. It kind of adds to the variety of it. But it makes it a bit unclear for us, you know. But gradually we kind of cement down lines, and then you kind of know your line.
Yeah.
But it's a good point about not making it too chorally, and it's a thin line for sure.
Yeah, I've always liked that about the tunes that I've heard that you guys crank out.
Okay.
It's always very suitable. The harmonies they suit supporting the song that is being sung.
That's the number one thing, is that it's completely organic. Like, that is 90% of it is just sit at the table, sing it again, move on to the next one, sing it again, next week again, and so on, until eventually it sort of appears, you know.
There's 4 of us now in Pressgang Mutiny, but at one point we did have 7 singers, and you know, it gives you that extra sort of the extra muscle, I suppose. But at the same time, it could get very murky at times, and it could get very kind of unclear who's doing what. So that was something I remember sort of talking with some of the fellows about, that, all right, there's 7 of us, but maybe the song only needs two parts, or maybe it only needs 3 parts. 4 can sometimes already sort of get a little too filled out, I feel. And I agree with you guys that there's sort of a feeling when you know that it seems right. And it's sort of an intuitive thing. Some of what you guys do remind me of one of our favorite groups too from Ireland, which is the Voice Squad.
For me, the Voice Squad was the ultimate singing unit, you know.
Oh, they're unreal.
We're lucky ourselves, like, we have the spread of singers we have. Like, we have, like, I'm a second bass, would say, you know, if in a choral sense, like, Colin is a second bass, Brian is a second bass. We have, you know, bass stroke, baritones. We have tenors. We have 2 tenors, like, so, you know, it opens up a lot of stuff, like.
But we do like to what we call codified songs. So, like, we do want it to kind of sound like a distinctive sound. You know, we have our own way of doing things, and it's what makes the Coda sound. And I suppose the voices and the blend and everything. But we want to keep it sparse, but we also want to make it a Coda sound. You know, so it's trying to get that balance, I suppose. You know. Keeping faith with the original Shanties and that. But Shanties is obviously one part of what we do, and as you said earlier, we sing a lot of different stuff. We do some Scots Gaelic, we do some Irish, we do, you know, some contemporary, and we have a few of our own as well. And you know, so it's a big mix of things. But we love the Shanties, and they always go down really well.
Now, one thing I noticed growing up when I would listen to the Clancy Brothers or the Dubliners, they would do the sort of folksel songs, so the nautical songs that the sailors would have done on their free time, and they'd also do, you know, a shanty like Holloway Joe. And at the time, it never really struck me as this being any, you know, particularly different from Irish traditional singing. And I was wondering, for you guys growing up in Ireland, is this something that was sort of always part of the folk tradition, or was it something that you guys were aware of, you know, came from a different tradition and you wouldn't hear very frequently, or how did that sort of play into the overall Irish traditional scene there?
Well, there's a whole, I'll just say briefly, because the 2 lads will be better on this, there's a whole plethora of Irish singing, like, you know what I mean? Like it starts, I suppose, with Shanno singing. That would be the purest form of it, and it moves on then into folk singing, or, you know, more folky song, and to the modern contemporary stuff, like. So the Clancys are somewhere in there, and Tommy Makem and all that. And I suppose that would be classified as folk, really, as opposed to traditional. Do you know what I mean? I'd say. What do you think?
Okay, so my people, my father was from Donegal in the northwest of Ireland, and I come from that tradition, you know. So he was a Gaelic speaker. His Irish Gaelic was his first language, and I was raised in County Meath, which is near Dublin, and we spoke Irish at home as our first language. And he came from a tradition where songs were just huge. It was in the kitchen, and it was, you know, songs and singing songs, and that was the big thing, as against where he came from, as against in other parts of the country where it might be fiddle playing or flute playing or piping or whatever. So the songs was the big thing, but the songs they sang were in Irish mostly, but they also had songs in English. But these songs, lot of the songs would be songs that came from all over Ulster or from Scotland or from England. The guys used to go over, they were immigrant or migrant workers. They went off to Scotland working on farms for the summer and then came home. And the money they made there kept the families going. But they brought back songs. My granny used to say to the guys when they were going off working, "What do you want, Maggie?" They'd say to her. She'd say, "Bring me back a song." So they brought back these songs from Scotland and from England, and there might be songs like you would really hear in the English folk tradition. And my sister Trina, she sang a lot of these songs. So you might know songs like "When I Was a Fair Maid," and this was a song that my grandfather possibly brought back to my granny in Donegal, and then Trina picked up this song, or "Do You Love an Apple," or some of these songs, you know. So
this is the Bothy band, obviously. You're talking.
these are my sister was in and brother were both in the Bothy band. We played with Matt Malloy and Donal Lunny and guys. But so all these songs, this was the kind of tradition, the kind of singing they had. So they sang either in Gaelic or in English. But sea shanties wouldn't have been a part of that repertoire at all. And then you moved down the west of Ireland, you go down to in Galway and Connemara, and again it was the Irish tradition, or down in Kerry, and I suppose the sea shanty thing is something that came with the ballad groups, with the likes of the Clancy Brothers. This was in the early '60s, and they started this whole kind of ballad singing. Now, my mother was a ballad singer, and she was from Dublin, but she used to sing all these, like the Boys from Barnastraig and these old ballads that she'd learned. But again, it was there was a kind of revival in the 50s and 60s where they brought these old songs and brought them to the general population around the country, and popularized by the Dubliners and the Clancy Brothers in particular, you know. So and then the sea shanty thing kind of came in there. I don't know, Brian, what would you?
Yeah, I think that the sea shanties kind of just appeared on the horizon in the midst of lots of kind of folk songs, and you know, I don't think we ever thought. Well, I certainly didn't think too much. I just thought they were great songs. I didn't really think too much about them, or about, you know, the fact that they were old songs and working songs and whatever. They just seemed to kind of appear in the mix of Clancy Brothers albums and Dubliners and whatever, and they just kind of got sort of assumed into the tradition of singing and folk, you know, kind of like just very sort of without us knowing it nearly. Well, that's my feeling, but I'm sure there are a lot of people in Ireland who love sea shanties and who, you know, that's all they sing.
Going back to that Donegal connection, I know that the Donegal fiddle style is pretty influenced by the Scottish fiddle style as well.
Yeah.
And in fact, some of the
so.
tunes might be sort of Scottish tunes played with more of a Donegal kind of accent.
Shanties and all these, different types of dance too.
Right. But then it makes me think how, going back to Stan Hugel's book, Shanties from the Seven Seas, which we seem to reference in every episode, he makes a point of saying that it was the Irish merchant Johns that were sort of carrying these songs between New York and Liverpool, and then how those got kind of mixed in with the Afro-Caribbean songs as well to sort of, you know, provide us with what we now refer to as the shanty kind of repertoire. So I find it interesting that maybe these guys had left Ireland. They're sort of going between Liverpool and New York, but they're bringing their songs with them, and then the songs sort of evolve as they would in North America and coming into contact with different cultures. And then I find it really interesting that you guys are hearing these sort of coming back to Ireland in around the 60s, and that it just kind of resonates with what else is going on.
Well, these songs, like as the lads say, nobody ever knew really that these were shanties. They were just songs, like, you know, they were just good songs, and nice, enjoyable songs to listen to, good songs to sing, rousing songs. They were songs, you know. It really, there was no thing about shanties at all. Like, I mean, the word shanty really, the first time I remember hearing, actually, there's a certain category of song called a shanty, there was a group in England, and won some award. A group of guys that from a coastal village. I can't remember their name. They got famous for singing sea shanties. And I saw them on the BBC Folk Awards or something, and I thought, oh, Jesus, that...
It's the Fisherman's Friends.
Fisherman's Friends, that's it, yeah. So I was kind of like, oh, so this is a shanty, right? Well, we're singing shanties, so there you go.
Yeah, where's our award? $1 million contract and Netflix movie. Yeah.
But it was like, and it's the same in all aspects of trad music, really. Like, there's all kinds of influences that are there that nobody really identifies, really, or mentions. Like, I mean, there's a lot of classical influence in traditional music itself, like in tunes and stuff. But yet nobody really just mentions it. It's just, well, it's a good tune or it's a bad tune, or it's a good song or it's a bad song. Like, that's it. Like, and if they're good songs, they survive. And if they're bad songs, that's that,
Yeah, it's the ultimate test.
Mm.
Yeah. I was curious as well, Declan, you were mentioning the Shanno singing, like the old time singing. And one thing we were chatting with last week with Sean McCann was the tradition, and I don't know if it's called Shanachie, I don't know if I'm correct in saying that, but the spoken word tradition, which Sean was saying actually lived on in Newfoundland for some time as well. Can you guys tell us a little bit about this? Because this is something very unique, I feel, and it's something I've only really ever seen in Ireland.
Well, the Shanachie, and O'Connell will probably give you more of, but the Shanachie was basically a storyteller. There would be a Shanachie in every sort of area locally, in your parish or maybe in a couple of parishes, and he would go around to a house and he would just tell stories, like, No, he was very good at telling stories. There was a lot of to it, and there were great stories. So, but it was a guy who collected stories and told them, and, put on actions and nearly acted them out, like, and that's where it came from. I'm not sure what does it mean in Irish, Colin, Shanachie? Or...
Well, Shan is old, like Shannos is the old way of doing things, right? So Shannos dancing, Shannos singing, and then Shanachie was, as you said there, the storyteller. So, for instance, now in Ranafast in Donegal, where my father was from, there was a guy there, Mickey Nail was his name, and Mickey had all these stories, and some of these stories might last half an hour long, and he would tell the story time after time after time, to every word exactly the same, and there was kind of a ritual way of telling these stories, and so the story would start like, they would start at the break of day in the old days of the day of of yore. There was kind of a way of saying things, like, and it was repeated, and he would start another story, and these were stories about Fionn McCool and the Fianna, and each story might start exactly the same way and then diverse and tell different parts of the stories, but there would be kind of almost like choruses through these old stories where things were repeated, and you would hear, and people liked the familiarity of that sort of thing, so they'd be like, I know that bit, as they were listening to the story, and great old stories, and thankfully a lot of these, they've all been recorded, and they're in, the Folklore Commission in Ireland, and they've digitized them now at this stage, and they haven't been lost.
But it is a dying art form in Ireland. Shanachie is, you hardly ever, like 30, 40 years ago, even on shows like the Late Late Show or TV show, you'd have a Shanachie on maybe a couple of times a year, and it'd be a thing. It's kind of very much on the decline, I would have thought, and
it's the problem with a lot of the those old traditions. They're dying out because the young people aren't taking them up, and but thankfully there's loads of music happening that the music doesn't seem to be dying, but some of the oral traditions seem to
there's another
dying,
thing, attention span, that's another that's a problem. Like, for people to sit and listen to a story that could go on for 20-30 minutes. There's another type of song that's it's nearly a Shanachie type song, and there was a few exponents of it. There's a guy in Galway called Dr. Brian O'Rourke, And Brian O'Rourke wrote these songs. Each of them was about 20 minutes long, and they're a story. They're generally very, very funny, like absolutely, seriously funny. One of his most famous, he had two of his most famous ones. One is called Drum Snot, and it's a sort of it's a kind of a piss take on the sort of Irish, song. Like it starts off, "Ah, come on, ye pleasant fellow, peasants, and listen to my song." And he goes on like this, like for the whole thing, like it's bonkers. It's 20 minutes long. You would laugh out loud at this stuff. And there's another one called Chantel de Champignon, and it's about a fella who meets this French girl. And but if you ever get to check him out, he only used to make tapes. Like you would never. It probably is on YouTube. Like, but they were like a cross between Shanachie and singing, like 20-minute song, and very funny. Like
So just a point on what James is talking about in Shanachie and why is it dying out. I mean, if I think back to my father when he was young, and in that generation, they just went from house to house to Cayley, as they called it, which was to chat and to play music and maybe to sing songs. And that was their social thing. And of course, there was no telly and all the rest of it. But, and that, of course, lent itself to the oral tradition so much. And that's completely gone now. Nobody knows in Ireland now. Like, I'm living in rural, like a few miles outside Westport, and there are houses sort of sprouted around, but nobody goes to anybody else's house or anything like that. That day is completely gone.
But as you said, Brian, there, people went from, there were no televisions, no radios, and that's how all those songs and stories and tunes and everything, and they all were there, yeah.
A few months ago, we got to talk to one of the Barely Whalers. So these are guys from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and they sang these songs in the 50s and 60s as they're rowing their boats out to catch whales and bring them back. And one of them said in that conversation that he's like, electricity, it's just it's been the biggest curse for all of those traditions. They've lost their Anansi stories. They're starting to lose the songs. And if nobody writes them down and records them, you don't get them back. And I think it's no surprise, like, you look at where shanties have really spiked over the last few years, and one was in the context of a video game, so you're doing something else and these shanties are coming along, hey, that's kind of cool. And the other was TikTok, where it's 30 seconds or a minute to get all this. But you guys have also had some success with alternate formats, or at least non-traditional shanty formats on YouTube. With your Lever Johnny, like, what is it, north of 3 million views? I think it was the last time we looked. It's incredible.
It's 3.1 million or something at the moment, yeah.
So congrats on that. But tell us a little bit about it.
2.9 million of them are me just going.
Yeah. Can you do that for the podcast? Because we could use a few of those too.
I was going to say, you got to teach Stefan your technique. He wishes.
Yeah. So, but were you surprised by that?
I can't remember how it started. It got picked up or something. It got picked up by some New York. Was it something?
No, San Francisco, the
Right.
Globe.
Globe,
I think,
yeah.
picked it up.
And I think
And
they
somebody-
shared it on something, and
and
then
somebody
it started
shared
to go, up and up.
But
and
it
up.
also, I think a lot of it was to Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, for anybody who watches, or plays video games, Assassin's Creed, there's a drop-down menu, and you can listen to because it's the pirate stuff, you can listen to all these different shanties. And so one of the shanties was Lever Johnny Lever. So people were obviously listening to this and then probably going online to see to listen to other versions on YouTube or whatever. And they came across ours, and suddenly they started more and more watching.
Well, I thought I heard the old man say, "Leave her, Johnny, leave her. It's a long, hard pull to your next payday, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her."
But a lot of those Assassin's Creed kind of aficionados or people that are on that, they mightn't be too enamored of our version of it because they want it faster and louder and more raucous, and like the original one on that is it's awful.
Is that right?
But
I never heard it. I've never heard the original.
I thought I heard the old man say, "Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Tomorrow ye will get your pay, and it's time for us to leave her." Leave her,
We had the chance to speak to Sean Dager, who's one of the guys who performed on that album, and he was saying the person who was producing it wouldn't really let them do harmonies. They always did a drunk take over top, so part of it was they're trying to. Yeah, well, he's like, okay, now make pretend you're really hammered and sing it again, and so he's gone on to sing other shanties with much more, I think, what we would find appealing arrangements since then, because that was his introduction. But at the time, they're deliberately going for what would a bunch of dudes on a ship actually sound like, and that was the aesthetic.
Well, we went from, I think it was about 60,000 hits to suddenly within 2 or 3 days it was up on 200,000 hits. It started to go massively for a while then. But it's going up about, I don't know, it was about 5,000 a day or something like that.
But just to be clear now, the guys that are playing Assassin's Creed, they like the song, and
They do.
As good as anybody else's. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, if I'm in bad humor, I just go online and have a look at that YouTube clip and start looking at the comments, and it cheers me up no end, because they just tend to really like it. The vast majority of comments are really positive, and I think, oh Jesus, that's great, that's nice.
And the fun, I had never when I picked that song, I said, let's try this song. I had never heard of Assassin's Creed, to be honest. I'd literally never heard of it. I had no idea anything about Assassin's Creed. And I can't even remember where I heard whatever version was it first. Was it Tommy Makem? I'm not sure.
Tommy Makem, I think, did it.
I'm not even sure now what kind of version I heard. And then I said, he had a camcorder. I said, let's just stick this camcorder over here and record it for the crack, till we see. We had only really started singing, I think, at that point. And we stuck the camcorder over and just turned it on, and that was it. And funny thing is, since then, we've paid good money to have videos made. Waste of time. Stick the camera over there. There you go. It's who knew? It's funny. But as Brian says, it does your heart good. When you look at the comments now, all right. Now, there are some comments on it, it has to be said, that only obviously people that play the game or gamers understand. I don't know what some of them mean, but yeah.
We'll stick the link in the show notes for this, but would you guys mind leading us in that song? We'd love to sing along with you.
Well, I thought I heard the old man say, "Leave her, Johnny, leave her. It's a long, hard pull till your next payday, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Oh, pull, you lovers, or you'll get no pay. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, pull, you lovers, and then belay, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Oh, the skipper was bad, but the mate was worse. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. He would cut you down with a spike or a curse, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. oh, it's time for to say goodbye. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Those pilings, they are drawing nigh, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Oh, beautiful. That was great.
Wonderful. I was thinking I'd like to circle back to a couple things that we were talking about just shortly before the shanty there. How important do you think it is to maintain sort of regional differences of tunes? Nowadays we've got the internet, of course, so everything is accessible to us. And how important is it to bring in different influences into your music? And I think you guys really love the mix of what you guys do. So I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, well, in singing, there are definite regional differences in Ireland. You know, you have down in West Cork and Kerry, you have the Kool-Aid tradition there, the singing. You know, Iarla O'Leonard would be a prime example of that, and the way they sing down there. And then you move up then to Galway area, Connemara, and Shamnos singing there. And then Ulster is, you know, you've got the ballads singing in Ulster and the lovely songs, and it's more melodic. You know, in Connemara, it's all about ornamentation, whereas in Ulster, it's the tune, it's the songs. You know, so those regional differences are still very much there. The super groups, the Planksties and the Bothy Band, and Brian's brother Morris was in Stockton's Wing, and there's many of those groups, you know, have taken songs from the different regions and brought them to the general audience, you know, and all over the world, of course, too. Now, yeah,
I'd agree with what Conal is saying, and I suppose regionalisation has become a little bit sort of dumbed down with just technology. And sometimes now, if you hear a fiddle player or a flute player, you'd be hard pressed to say what county they were born in if you just heard them playing, with a few exceptions. And so there's still, you know, there are still a very strong Clare style, Sligo style, Donegal, Kerry. I suppose it's all along the Atlantic coast as well, that you get the very strong kind of definite styles, you know. But it's inevitable that would change, just with everything. And I think your other part of your question is like, what about sort of influences of other genres, musical genres, and how it affects it? And like, I think, like everything, it has to develop. And like, so I suppose what we're doing is a bit unique in the sense that I don't think there's been another kind of 7-piece vocal group who kind of mix in a bit of trad, a bit of, you know, kind of with classical background, with, you know, sea shanties, with, you know, Scots Gaelic songs. So it's quite of a mix, and then we sort of do our own kind of take on it. And music has to develop and progress, like so like, I suppose you'd like to think that it's making a contribution and that it will influence other people, maybe younger, like, because we're getting a bit older now. So you'd like to think that it would make other young musicians who maybe play music to think about singing, you know, and to get into the singing tradition a bit more, because there isn't an awful lot in the singing. Like, there's there's thousands of musicians in the country, flute players, pipers, fiddle players, a fantastic explosion of Irish traditional musicians. I would have thought that the singing hasn't sort of developed in the same ways that the music and the dance has.
So to that end, you've got 2 albums showcasing what you do. Mouth Music, which I think is I was able to find on SoundCloud, and Train of Spirits, which is up on Spotify. So what's next as the world sort of reopens from the pandemic? What's next for Coda?
Well, we were commissioned recently to do a thing. Conor will tell you about it, but we were commissioned by the Achill Harp Festival to take if you've heard of the O'Carolan music, the O'Carolan Irish traditional tunes, and it turned out that there was a lot of these O'Carolan tunes that there was words to that weren't widely known. So we were commissioned to basically sing these songs and record them, which we did live for a thing.
Yeah, it was Nisha Kelly, the great harpist from. She's actually from Westport, where we're all living, but she's living in Achill, and she's been playing these Carolan tunes for donkey's years. But people know these tunes so well, but most people don't know that there were words to these songs were commissioned. When O'Carolan in the late 1600s, early 1700s, as he was traveling around Ireland, he got paid to write these tunes. But there were songs, so they were written in praise of, well-to-do landowners, and so they were written maybe for a wedding or for in praise of some guy, maybe as a lament or whatever. And so they actually had the words, and they were written in Irish. And so we ended up singing 9 of these songs. I think it was 2 we sang in English, and the rest were in Irish. And it was a great thing to do, because we kind of knew the tunes, like She Wore, for instance, that one.
Of course.
A great tune, but there are words to it, so it was lovely to do these things.
Some of the words were greatest, some of the words.
Yeah, they were hard now, some of them, there was a lot of too many words. But we kind of had to work around that, and we codify them, do our own harmonies and stuff with them. We had a girl called Frida Hatton played harp with us, which was lovely. The harp really went well with the voices as well, so it was a great thing. So I think you can actually, if you tune in, if you go onto the Achill Harp Festival website, you can actually still see it there. The concert that we did, yeah.
And that might form the basis of an album. That's kind of where you were asking what are we doing next, or what might we do next? Well, we worked pretty hard on that for quite a few months. So we had about 9 or 10 songs, and we're kind of thinking about, we might even think about releasing that as an album of just Carolan stuff. And after that, we're just trying to get back together after COVID, and I suppose we're interested in writing more of our own songs. And having, sort of original stuff. And after that, we're just at much more the same kind of thing, maybe using different instruments, looking at maybe having not just guitars and whistles, but maybe having other instruments backing us just to make the sound different,
Nice.
So, yeah.
Cello or something like that would be lovely, Yeah.
All right. So just a couple other sort of questions or things I'd like to hear you guys talk about here is the fact that you guys are living in the town where Matt Malloy's pub is, and it's a really fantastic spot that I've been able to hear you guys a little bit at in the past, and also the fact that you guys had Donell Lunny produce your second album. These are really legendary musicians in the Irish scene and internationally. So what is the impact of having a place like Matt Malloy's in your hometown?
Well, I'll go first, Ray. it's like the Mecca, you know. It's like it's like living in Mecca, you know, wherever the place, and like everyone, there's sessions, music in Malloy's every night. There's sessions every night. There are a couple of musicians who are sort of, you know, get paid to go in, but people come in, they join in, and it's absolutely fantastic. And Matt is fantastic. All the Malloys are fantastic. The whole family are absolute brilliant people. You know what I mean? So it's like going in. It's like going in home, like going into the place, and you sit down, you play, and you know people, and people come in, and Matt comes in, you know, and that's it's just unbelievable. Like, I mean, Matt is he's like a, well, we have a nickname for Matt. I don't know if he knows this, but we call him the Tank, like, because he's just unbelievable. He just rolls on, like, he's like your man out of the Rolling Stones. What do you call him?
Keith Richards?
Huh?
Keith Richards?
Keith Richards. He's
Yeah.
the Keith Richards. Like, he just keeps going, like, you know what I mean? Like he has his own boat and he's sailing to Iceland, he's sailing down to Spain, and he's up in the pub and he's playing there all hours of the night. And the man is just unbelievable, like, really. Like, so, I mean, I don't think, for me, I can't imagine a better place. I get to play with phenomenal musicians like, you know, including Brian and everyone else that plays there. Donal, I don't know, Brian, how we met Donal?
Yeah. I suppose to kind of go to what Declan is saying, the beauty of Matt's, there's a whole lot of things about it that are great, but I suppose for me, it has maintained its oldness. There's no telly in the pub. It's full of snugs. It's just the atmosphere, the lighting is perfect. And then Matt's often there himself, and if he is, he'll often play. But there's always a good session. There's no mics in the session. It's acoustic, you know. It's just very authentic. And I think people absolutely love it. They just love the feel of the place. It's like stepping back in time nearly, you know, or it's like going right back to kind of what makes us, in a kind of a way, you know, really come alive, you know. And then we've been lucky because Matt's introduced us to loads of different people, like, so, you know, including Donal, who got to hear us out in Inishbofin and just liked the sound. And Connell knows Donal for years, of course, because of the bossy connection with Trina and Mihal, and that's how we got Donal on board. And of course, it was fantastic to have him and just to have his expertise. And then we had Morris, my brother, helped out on the first album, and we'd started it on our own, and we got about halfway, and then we started losing our way. And we said, Jesus, I think because there's 7 of us and we all highly opinionated, you can imagine. And so we said, okay, we need somebody in here to kind of just call the shots. So Morris came in towards the latter end of that album and really kind of helped. And he's just a great head. He's a great music brain. So he's able to kind of pick some nice arrangements on different songs and whatever. And so we've been really, and then we got to work with Steve Cooney on that Carlin project. We've been really blessed with these great people that we've worked with, and it's it's fantastic. It's been a fantastic kind of a journey, you know.
I mean, it's great to hear people's, you know, if you have somebody producing, like, you would have to have somebody producing with 7 people, like. But I mean, but apart from that, it's just great to hear these ideas, you know, what about this or that, or let's try this, like, you know, man, that's fantastic, you know, that you wouldn't think of, like, you know, once somebody's looking in from the outside. And of course, it's much easier to say something looking in from the outside. If you're one of the 7 and you're kind of going, I don't know, is that working? Like, you know, 3 people are thinking it's working, 3 are going, I don't know, you know, it's fantastic. But to work with Donal and Steve Cooney and Morris, like, I mean, that's it. I'm happy, you know. To go back to Malloy's, what Brian said there is absolutely true. It is like it's gone back in time, and I mean, you know, like I used to play maybe 2-3 nights a week, and then I'm currently just playing maybe 1 or 2. But you go in there every night and you play tunes with people, and that's one of the most beautiful parts of playing music. Is to hit that moment of flow, you know what I mean, where everything just goes lovely, and it's just grooving, and it's in tune, and everything sounds phenomenal, and it just flows along. And of course, it doesn't happen every night, like. So, but rather than being away off doing gigs and gigs and gigs, which are quite hard work and stressful, to go into this beautiful pub every night and be able to, let's try that same set again, like, and see if we can just get it, boom, fantastic. I'm in heaven.
Well, I have to say I've been lucky to be at Matt Malloy's a couple times, and it never disappoints. But there was one night in particular where I came into that back room, and you guys were all there. Coda was all there, and it was John Bishop as well. I was there with, I think, a film crew from the BBC or something.
Yeah.
And it was so surreal, and I got to meet Matt for the first and only time I ever got to meet him, and it's just pretty magical. I remember playing a tune that I'd learned off of a recording I purchased that you did with Sean Keane and Liam Flynn on the pipes there, and just really surreal. I think especially coming from North America and really idolizing a lot of like the chieftains and a lot of these musicians, really, really incredible to just walk into that kind of really authentic atmosphere.
Well, that's the thing. It is authentic. There's absolutely nothing. There's nobody putting on anything. It's just the way it is. Like, it's not. Obviously, tourists come in and whatever, but it's not actually for tourists. Like, it's just for musicians. You know what I mean? And all the musicians are looked after, and everyone is bought drink, and there's no problem. Like, fantastic.
Yeah, it's unreal.
It's a very welcoming. It's a welcoming place, and you don't always get that, and that always hasn't been the way. So, like back in the 70s or 80s, if you went to Dublin and you went in to play music in some of the pubs, maybe on Capel Street, which were kind of very well known, you weren't always. It wasn't always that good vibe, So, and I remember going to London for a summer when I was a student, and I had the flute with me for 3 months, and I played like once, I think. Because again, it wasn't particularly welcoming where I went. It was kind of a closed shop scene, So you kind of take it for granted that it's nice and welcoming, but it's not like that. Not necessarily like that, So we're lucky.
Connell, I know you have a vacation to get back to, and really appreciate you carving some time out of that. I hope we get the chance to sing with you guys in person in future, but this has been really enjoyable. Really appreciate the time.
Really, really means a lot to get to chat with you guys. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us on.
It'd be lovely to meet up with you sometime to sing a few songs.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, well, you know where we are.
Yeah.
And thanks for inviting us on.
Absolutely. Well, if you're coming to Ireland, let us know, and we'll set up something, and we'll do something together. No problem.
We'd love to.
Malloy's or do something like,
That'd be great.
We will happily go to Canada as well to visit.
Go to Canada?
you.
Yes.
Well, that was great. I learned a ton. That was excellent conversation. And gosh, am I ever pining for that trip across the ocean to walk those shores. And I've never been to Ireland myself. I've always loved to go. So if we could go and get some time over there with those gents, I know that we would have a really good time throwing down some harmonies with them. So what an interview. That was great. I know, Steph, you had a couple other thoughts that you wanted to share with our listeners, viewers.
Yeah, just a couple notes. We're recording this in the middle of November, and we've had a couple anniversaries just go by. On November 10th, it's the anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975, and on the very next day, on November 11th, is the anniversary of the wreck of the ship that Stan Hugel, who we mention often in the episodes, sailed in. It's called the Garth Pool. And that she was wrecked in 1929. She was the last commercial square rigger still in operation. And then one last very sad note for fans of vocal harmony. You've probably encountered the group Coop Boys and Simpson. If you haven't, I would strongly recommend checking them out. Just great vocal harmony all around, and seriously good shanties as a mix of that. And Barry Coop, one of the three members of that group, sadly passed away in the past week. And there's a really great tribute I came across. We'll link it up in the show notes. Our friend James Fagan has a radio show based out of Sheffield. And thank goodness it's folk. And they did a really, really touching tribute to Barry, including conversations with his daughter Katie and the rest of the family. So really would recommend checking that out. And again, we'll link it up in the show notes. So thanks so much for spending some time with us. We will be back in a few weeks with another episode. As always, please hit the like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference to us if you do that, and it's just a small thing. So please take the time to do that, and we will see you all next time.
Heel your home, boys, let her go, boys, heave her head round into the weather. Heel your home, boys, let her go, boys, sailing homeward to Mingulay. What care we though white the menches? What care we, boys, the windy weather? When we know that every inch is closer homeward to Mingulay. Heel your home, boys, let her go, boys, heave her head round into the weather. Heel your home, boys, let her go, boys, sailing homeward to Mingulay. Wives are waiting by the pierhead, gazing seaward from the heather. Heave her head round and we'll anchor ere the sun sets on Mingulay. Heel your ho, boys, let her go, boys, heave her head round into the weather. Heel your ho, boys, let her go, boys, sailing homeward to Mingulay. Sun comes low now by the yard, boys, bright the clouds are to the westward. Songs of home fly in the wind, boys, flying homeward to Mingulay. Heel your ho, boys, let her go, boys, heave her head round into the weather. Heel your ho, boys, let her go, boys, sailing homeward to Mingulay. Sailing homeward to Mingulay.